Yo, producer, hit these guys with the intro.
You got it, Chappie. Let's go.
Welcome to Dauntless Dads. Being a dad is awesome. Being a dauntless dad is awesomer. But how do you become a dad who lives courageously resolute, undiscouraged, and in a way that is unable to be intimidated or subdued? Every week, that's exactly what we talk about. Every conversation you will listen to will inspire, motivate, or equip you to go from just being dad to becoming a dauntless dad. Let's jump in. Mr. Matt Wimberly, welcome to the podcast.
Thank you, sir. Good to be here.
Bro, we've been trying to track you down for months, but you're busy, I'm busy. Both of us have a lot going on, you know?
Mm-hmm. It's true.
But the other day, I'll be honest with you, I didn't even know you scheduled this podcast when you scheduled it, because I sent you the link, and then all of a sudden, my wife and I are at church, and she said, "Hey, babe, I noticed Matt scheduled a podcast with you," because we share our calendars, and the invite event popped up on her calendar, and I was like, "Thanks for letting me know."
Hey.
I didn't even know I didn't know it was on.
Good on you for sharing your calendar. I like it.
Yeah. So, but dude, so pumped to have you on. I've been trying to get you on, one, because I want to talk to, it's always good just to see your face. Like, saw you guys a couple months ago when we were traveling. But your story and what you and your wife have navigated over 10 years of marriage, hasn't been the easiest thing in the world, especially when it comes to, there's all kinds of different things we can face in marriage. And you guys have faced some things head on, and Steph and I were around for part of it at the beginning of your marriage, and then there was the other part where it was from a distance, and we're watching you from California or another state, and the whole step of the way, like, I just always remember either Steph would talk to Sarah or something, and she'd be like, "Hey, we need to pray for the Wimberleys right now." And I'm like, "Okay, let's do it." So, but also, people don't know this, and I'll let you introduce yourself in a second, but you and I shared a room for about a year.
And let me clarify too. It was a very cold room majority of the time.
Well, and you like cold.
Ice cold. Yes,
right?
100%.
And it's because of you that I like really cold bedrooms, because I never liked cold bedrooms. But now my wife is always like, "Babe, why are you turning the AC on? It's the middle of winter."
Yeah.
I'm like, "Blame Matt."
Yeah, whatever.
So, and you used to wake me up in the middle of the night because you talked in your sleep. And when I say talk in your sleep, you had full, clear, coherent conversations with somebody while you were sleeping.
We shared a room for, I don't know how long.
It was about a year. I think it was
about a year. But it's always been talks about this, Cody. You never did ever record it. You record a video, nothing. So no one else has said this other than you. So I don't know if it was your presence or I was just trying to continue our conversation, but after I had fallen asleep. So
gosh, it was good times. Yeah. No video or photo evidence of that is had. So, well, why don't you just give people a brief rundown of who you are? Just a little bit about your background. Just give us the couple-minute version of, like, who's Matt Wimberly.
Who's Matt Wimberly? Yeah. Before I do too, I want to call out. One, I've been encouraged by this podcast, just so you know.
Cool.
Love you a ton, man. But also too, like, one of the times that you've texted me about jumping on I was honestly, and we hadn't talked about it in a while, and I was listening. I was about halfway through one of the episodes of the podcast, and you randomly text me. You had no idea that I was listening to it or whatever. And so it's just kind of a unique thing, man, just kind of the Lord's timing and just like him leading you in that. And so Matt Wimberly, let's see. I am a part of the Wimberly clan. A lot of people, some people know that name. A lot of it stems from Living Water. My parents were pastors there for 20 something years. And so I'm a pastor's kid through and through. I'm a church rat. Loved when I was growing up. I always wanted to go with my parents to be there, man. When it was, worship rehearsal, like when you were Living Water, man, I'd go see you do the worship rehearsal, right? But then we'd also be the last ones to leave. And that was something that I will cherish looking back in my life, because it was a choice that I made. It wasn't something that I had to do,
Yep.
which can speak into a lot of different things. But yeah, I mean, I was grew up sports guy, very competitive. I have four other brothers, so five of us in total. You've seen some inside scoops behind the
Oh yeah.
scenes of
Yep.
all of us getting competitive, right? Whatever it was,
Rowdy.
right?
Getting rowdy.
Rowdy,
Getting rowdy.
basketball, rock, paper, scissors, ping pong, foosball, you name it, man. Like we just went for it. And so just growing up into high school, very much a sports family. Played football and did wrestling 1 year. Did not like it, but kept playing football, and then got into doing an internship right out of high school at Living Water. Did that for 2 years, and after that, started getting in life and working. Ended up finding my bride as the singles crew at Living Water. Let's go now. And the rest from there, man, just moved to my wife and I ended up moving about a year after marriage from Olympia, Washington to Orange County. And a
Hmm.
lot of that stemmed from me wanting to go to Bible college. So I went to
Yep.
Life Pacific University. We jumped into this tiny little, well, first off, we moved to um, a rundown building that the church owned, that they had apartments for an internship, that no one was there. So we were in this entire building all by ourselves.
That's
So
creepy.
it was very creepy. My wife disliked it very much. We started showing up and unpacking, and we had people there helping us. And she
Uh-huh.
literally was putting stuff back on the U-Haul because she's like, "This is not what I signed up for."
Oh my gosh.
And yeah, so another time, another day to share that story. But yeah, from there we ended up taking on a position down at the Father's House in San Diego, all still while I was going to school. So I was doing a lot of commuting
Yep.
and loved it. Loved the season there. Loved the people. Still is a lot of them we'll get into a little bit today. Of those are people we went to war with, people that
Yeah.
we walked through a lot of difficult things with, and so they're near and dear to our heart. About 4.5 years there, we ended up back at Olympia for
Hmm.
kind of a restful sabbatical season,
Yep.
just because of some of the things that we were walking through. It's kind of what we felt like the Lord was calling us to. And so that was about 2019, end of 2019, that we moved back to Olympia. And then we began, or 2018. And then
Hmm.
about 6 months after that, I started working at Living Water,
Yep.
Church of Living Water, on staff with yourself.
Yep.
We got to work together for a little bit, which was awesome. And did that for about a year and a half, and then ended up moving into a sales role. And kind of 4 years later, still in the sales role, different company, but absolutely love it. But in that time frame, my wife and I ended up moving from Olympia to Spokane, Washington, where we reside now with our three kiddos,
Hmm.
Riser, Quinn, and Wells. And yeah, like you mentioned, we just celebrated 10 years of marriage, which was pretty fun. Did a little vow renewal in our backyard with some of our close friends, and
Yeah.
it's yeah, got to just rededicate it, as well as remind the enemy that
Yep.
Jesus is at the center of this thing, and we're on for another 10 and many more. So
Yeah. Gosh.
that was
So
more than a couple minutes, but
no,
hey,
dude, that's good. I think so. I was going to ask you about that. So, vow renewals. I don't normally see people do them around 10 years. Normally it's
yeah,
15, 20, 25, 30, so on and so forth. Um, and when I found out you guys were doing the vow renewal, I was like, cool, awesome,
yeah,
rock and
yeah.
roll. But I wanted to ask you about that. So what was for you guys? Because I know vow renewals are very, like, they're not for other people. They're for the couple, right?
hmm hmm
Um, for you guys, what was the significance behind doing a 10-year vow renewal?
Hmm. I think the significance, one, I think early on in our marriage, we attended a vow renewal from
Hmm.
someone else that just kind of just was like, man, we want to do that.
Yeah.
Like this is awesome. We want to do it. And that was like probably 2 years into marriage, right? So it was
Hmm.
no like we were pushing it out a little bit. But then as it got closer and closer, I think it really came down to a couple different things. One, I think during the pandemic, a lot of our friends began to struggle with their marriages.
Hmm.
And I would say a good portion of them ended with some type of separation,
Yeah.
right? And so I think for us, like it was, And we had our difficulties and struggles, and we still
Sure.
do, right? But I think at the end of the day, for us, like it was an opportunity for us at 10 years to put a stake in the ground of like,
Mm,
here's where we've come, here's what we've walked through, here's how we've leaned in and pursued the Lord, and we pursued each other.
hmm.
um, and we brought people, our friends in our community that were around us that day. Man, some of them struggled, and some of them were
Yeah.
about to throw in the towels and things like that. And so I think for us, it was like, man, we want people to see not just how amazing we are, but more of like, man, God's been faithful, God's been
Yeah.
good. We're choosing to put Him at the center, and we're choosing to read it. We said our vows over it, the exact same vows,
Hmm.
and we committed to one another once again. And so it was pretty special, and I like it. Really, I felt like did something spiritually for us.
Yeah. Hmm.
It was a blast. We ordered way too much food and that we're still eating today. But overall, man, like it was this unifying piece that I feel like when we allowed the Lord to come in and do that, like there was just this extra connection in a sense of just like the Spirit unifying us even closer and more. And so
Yeah.
it was a joy and well worth it all.
Yeah. Now I'm going to come back and ask you something about unity in a second, because I know, yeah, I will say I know all of you guys have that word on your tattooed on your body.
Yeah.
I mean, it was a word that when I lived with you and your parents and your family, I mean, being in unity with your wife was one of the things that I learned from your dad
Yeah.
about like you don't move forward unless this one thing is present, and
Totally.
you don't go forward until it is there. And if it's not there, you fight until it gets there,
Yeah.
you know?
Yep.
But like, will you, because some people could hear like, oh, 10-year vow renewal and you made it through the pandemic and this stuff and everything. But nobody knows the things that you guys fought through, significant loss and
Yeah.
hurt and pain in those 10 years. Could you like just give people I mean, don't relive it,
Yeah.
but
Totally.
like give people an idea of like what you guys have walked through in the first 10 years, because I know there's a lot of people that have walked the same road, but
Yeah.
they might not be in that place of unity. So that's why I'm going to come back to that. But first I
Hmm.
want like tell people like some of the things that went on in those first 10 years.
Hmm. That is a loaded question. But I'll kind of categorize it in two two larger events,
Yep.
right? Um, One was something that lasted six years, right? One
Hmm.
has been just over a year or I guess a year and a half, almost 2 years now.
Yep.
So I'd say the first kind of monumental thing for us in our marriage was when we were beginning to try and have kids. It wasn't
Hmm.
really we were trying; it kind of just happened. At
Yeah.
least the first one, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
I'm sure. Yeah, I'm sure you guys can relate in a
Oh yeah.
variety of different ways. But I'd say, and this happened when we were living in California, is
Yep.
when we began to try, and we wanted families, right? Again, I have four brothers. My wife has two siblings. There was a deep desire for us to have a family
Hmm.
and to do that together.
Yeah.
And so we began the journey of trying to get pregnant. I remember the first time that that Sarah told me that we were pregnant, right? And it was like one
Hmm.
of those cheesy ones. We look back into it, and it was like I got home from school. I used to, commute about an hour and a half each way
Yeah.
at the time, and I got home, and Sarah said something about, "Hey, can you check the cookies in the oven or something like that?" And she literally had like on the pan, right, a pregnancy test there and everything like that. And
Yeah.
I lost it, right? But long story short is that began a journey of us struggling with maintaining pregnancies. Not
Hmm.
so much like the fertility issues, but
Yeah.
kind of maintaining pregnancies. And we began to walk through a season, a very long season of miscarrying. We
Hmm.
ended up miscarrying 6 different times
Mm.
that were really hard because you would constantly kind of go through that battle of, okay, Lord, you're faithful, you're good, you said this, but here we are again,
Yeah.
right? Like, and we're going through the season of celebrating other people, right? Like during one of those, we were literally same day we found out we were miscarrying. We were trying to celebrate with my sister-in-law, that they were finding out that they were having their first kid and it was a boy, right? And so I think there's a ton of grief that we've had to walk through in the loss of those six babies.
Yeah.
But I think also too, like just the grieving process for myself and for my wife, like there's that individual process of having to grieve and walk through that, but also how do you do that as a couple? And we're still figuring that part out. But it was hard, man. It was really difficult because it was a lot of loss in a season where we felt like there was so many other people celebrating what we were craving and what we were wanting.
Mm-hmm.
And then, seventh baby was Riser, our son, which was also the first boy on my side of the family, which was like, I don't know what I can say on this podcast, but I was pumped because being one of 5 boys, everyone else has had girls so far, and to have the first boy, it was like, eat it, fellas. Yeah, like back to the competitiveness, right?
Win.
I win. And so that was a big deal, man. And then, 16 months later, 17 months later, we had Quinn, and then 18 months later, we had Wells, which kind of leads me to the second, probably harder in a different way. But Wells is a unique kiddo, and who really is a miracle, man. Wells, we found out about 6 months into it that he typically when you do some type of blood test, they can basically tell if like any kid has like a T13, T18, T21, right? Which those are, Down syndrome, right? Some of these other things in there. Well, Wells's came back was indeterminate. So we don't get clarity if it's, true or false. We get indeterminate. So we had 3-4 months of trying to figure out, well, what is wrong? Like what's our son going to have? Yada yada yada. Well, come to find out, Wells had he has a partial of T18, which a lot of cases who have a full extra chromosome of T18 are tied to a breathing machine, are tied to some type of feeding tube, G tube that they have in, right? No kind of swallowing, nothing like that. But Wells is a unique case because he only has a partial of a partial, which does add some limitations and different things within his body and his anatomy and everything like that. And so that has been an entire loss, grieving, because he's over a year, but developmentally he's probably about 5-6 months, 7 months maybe. Not still drinking bottles, not eating anything, not crawling, right? Like not doing all these things that babies normally do.
Sure.
And so it's been a season of grieving what we were hoping for, but also trying to accept and as well as celebrate with what we do have.
Yeah. So
I know there's a lot there, so I'll maybe let you kind of point out areas maybe, but I think that there's they're connected, but they're very different, but they've also been probably the most difficult seasons of our life. And we're living in it a little bit still too.
Sure. Yeah. I think, like the thing it keeps running through my head is you and your wife, you start trying to start a family, right? And then you start running into like roadblock, right? And then I rewind the tape back to what you said about when you guys first got to Orange County and you start unloading your stuff and your wife starts putting boxes back in and she's like, this is not what I signed up for. I think that statement, when I overlay that on top of the struggles with fertility or not fertility, with maintaining pregnancies, and then even the challenges as much of a miracle as Wells is, and is going to be, like you, that same statement could be like, it's not what I signed up for. Like,
Yeah.
I want to have as many babies as I want and watch them, do their thing and, have this quote normal
Yeah.
family, how have you led your wife through and yourself
Yeah.
through because at the end of the day, it's all got to come back to some form of that in the back of your head. Like, what the hell? This is not what I signed up for, Lord. Like, this is not it. And we find out about a miscarriage the same day that we're trying to celebrate, and it's like when scripture says, weep with those who weep and rejoice with those who rejoice. It's like, how do I do that at the same time, God? How do I do that? What were some, like, how did you just lead yourself and your wife through this is not what I signed up for kind of like situations?
Oh, man. And I think, to be honest, Cody, like I'll probably break down here in the next few moments probably, but
Sure.
I think at the same time, man, like those are questions and thoughts that I still have today, right?
Yeah.
I think, two different scenarios. In the scenario of us walking through and they're connected though too. But I think, with us losing our six babies and walking through the miscarriage and all that loss and like, Sarah struggling with feeling like it was all her fault, right? But then it's
Sure.
like meeting with doctors and trying to figure out what's happening, what's wrong.
Yeah.
I think that there were multiple times where I remember going off to Palm Springs, praise the Lord, being so close. It was great. So,
Yeah.
there was a wonderful family who gifted us at their home. But to answer your question, I'm kind of trying to where I'm going though, but like there were moments that we had to decide which route we were going to take. Like we can hold on to a grudge and like I think there's a piece of grieving and not necessarily just accepting loss and you just forget about it, but you begin to walk through it and process through it and begin to live with it.
Yeah.
And I think part of how we did that practically was in Palm Springs. We decided to drive up one mountain. I don't know what it was. We found these rocks. We grabbed a Sharpie and we just began to, because we had names picked out for a lot of these babies.
Yeah.
And we began to just like write their names on it. And so I'd say that part of that process of leading myself and leading my wife was like, one, we there was things that we needed to do together, but there was also things that we needed to do separately.
Yeah.
Because I needed to get into a place where I was processing with the Lord, but then also giving space for my wife to process with the Lord as well. Because I remember one time we were in our home, in our condo, after one of our miscarriages, and that song Here Again by Elevation Worship. I just remember, man, that bridge just knocking me upside the head, and I was just on the ground weeping. And this was like months after, but I remember my wife saying, like, I hated seeing you like that. My wife was like, I hated it because it's not where I was. I didn't want that, right? And she was in her own way. So I would say part of it was allowing each other to have the space to process and grieve the way we needed to, but also finding those moments where we came together.
Yeah. I think that's so important because it's so easy as the man to be like, I'm just gonna fix it. I'm gonna fix it. And I'm gonna juggernaut through any wall and I'm gonna fix it.
Yeah.
And I think I often talk about like the two roles of a man, like the lion and the lamb.
Yeah.
Like there are moments for both of those things. Like there's moments where you need to be the lion and like you're putting the helmet on and you're bashing through everything. But then there's the other moments where I just need to be the lamb and go into my corner and process with the Lord and allow, because the other thing too, and this is what Steph and I learned early on. And it's the exact same thing you guys went through is I had to be okay with not being my wife's savior.
Yeah.
Like, because if I try to fix all of her problems and all of this and all of that, and what I do is I say, hey babe, whenever something's wrong, run to me, not to the Lord.
That's exactly right.
And what you led through there is you gave opportunity and space for your wife to say, like, I'm going to run to the Lord, not to you. I need you. We're one flesh, but like, I got some stuff only me and the Lord could figure out,
That's right.
but then not letting it end there, because I think that's where some couples go wrong, is they get so used to this perpetual season of we're going to separate and process, and then they never come back together.
Yeah.
It just, people always say, often say losing a kid drives a wedge in between, and that wedge just starts the separation process.
Yep.
And I think that's what watching from a distance, and then whenever we'd get together and seeing you guys, I was always so, like Stefan, I remember, after coming over to your house a couple times and, leaving, but we were both just so thankful for the Lord's grace on your life. And then also for how you guys have navigated that, because it's like, we've seen so many people go through it.
Yeah.
And it's the wedge that separates,
Mm-hmm.
but you guys did not allow that to be the wedge that separates.
Correct.
You allowed it to be something that through pain brought you closer together.
Yeah. Yeah. And I mean, the scripture that we always would remind ourselves, right, is, in scripture says, the Spirit comes to comfort us so that we can comfort others.
Yeah.
Right. And I feel like, and I'm still living this out, but I feel like the comfort that we received during those miscarriages, we're just now beginning to fully receive the comfort. Mm-hmm. Because if we look at the entire scripture, it's the Spirit comforts us so that we can comfort others. Mm-hmm. I believe in what we've experienced, and part of that healing process of grieving and loss and everything is like choosing as that journey goes, right? That you then now are in the position to, like, just the other day, one of our loved ones is walking through a miscarriage. We hate it, man, but man, we get to, it's not this like fear to jump back, but it's like, I remember how the Lord comforted me. I remember those encouraging words that I received from friends or from my wife. And now we get the position to comfort them. It's kind of this full circle of completion, almost, in a sense, of the initial intent and process of the Spirit comforting us. And so it to your point, I think it really can bring a separation, but it also can bring such a unifying position that really does create a blessing, but also magnifies the ability to then be a vessel for the Lord to use to comfort others and where they're at, and to relate on a certain level. All of them are very different, right, in their own way, but there is a lot of those pieces in that. And the other piece that I wanted to kind of highlight briefly was to some of your points of, like, rather choosing to just kind of silo ourselves and stay there. Mm-hmm. How did we come back and find each other? And about a month and a half after having Wells, Wells began to have these pretty consistent breathing episodes that he would go into these episodes of basically holding his breath for a really long time, mm-hmm. right? Turning blue and then finally letting out air, right? Yeah. And then just kind of coming to, and still does them to this day, mm-hmm. not anywhere to what it was. And so there was a time we ended up taking him into the ER. Long story short, we ended up being in the PICU for about 2 months. Mm-hmm. He ended up having jaw surgery, moving his jaw forward about 1 centimeter. He was intubated, all these different things. Well, in that season, about 2 months, month and a half, it was like Sarah and I were kind of like single parenting, right? And so to kind of go back to your point of, like, allowing each other, well, we didn't really have a choice to walk through that of, like, processing things on our own, because one was at the hospital and the other one was at home. And then 24 hours later, we would switch. But the thing that I felt like the Lord said to me was, like, I had to be extremely intentional in creating the space and time during this chaotic season of exhaustion, mm-hmm. feeling, emotionally deprived. Like, I mean, you name it, we were there. Yep. But I remember very, very vividly, man, like, I would leave the room, I would go in the hallway, and I would see her holding Wells. Mm-hmm. And, like, that's where I had to let go, right, and trust the Lord. But as I turned, man, like, that's when I began to focus on me, mm-hmm. which in turn, after those next 24 hours, I was able to come back and, like, feel filled up, I could come and encourage my bride, right? Like I could come
Mhm.
over and begin to, speak over wells, and then also hear too moments of the Lord meeting my wife in the hospital room, and just moment after moment. And so I'd say, like, man, if whoever's listening, like if you're walking through something and you're grieving, you're feeling a loss in some way, some fashion, and you're walking it through it with your spouse, man, absolutely find times to pursue the Lord, and allowing yourself to grieve and process, but also find your way back to that gift of the spouse and lean in those moments. And sometimes, man, it's just like we just held hands. We didn't know what to say.
Yep.
We didn't say anything,
Yeah.
but man, it was just those moments of choosing. We have to do this. We
Mhm.
need to stay connected. We need to stay unified, because it could have easily just taken us apart when
Yeah.
the Lord really did bring us closer.
Man, I like when you're talking about, the Spirit comforts us so we can comfort others. Like every person has their own path that they walk, that the Lord
Hmm.
has for them,
Yeah.
and not everybody experiences all the same things. And I think it's as unfortunate as those things are, and is just like, why God? It's like, at the same time, what a gift
Yeah.
that there are people in the body that have had to go through something terrible. And one of the ways the Lord redeems that is the Lord knows, like the Lord knew about the couple that you guys were going to be by that was going to experience this,
Yep.
and in his like, and that's why I just heard somebody the other day actually, just talking about how, because God is sovereign and the enemy's not, every time the enemy tries to do something, because God is sovereign, he's already figured out a way to turn it to good.
Yeah.
And so any bad thing the enemy tries to bring, the Lord's like, boom, like Uno reverse card,
Here
just
it is.
drops it,
Yeah. Yeah.
And like, there are people that you will be able to encourage and speak life to that I have no authoritative or experiential grounds to do it.
Yeah.
I mean, like Steph and I mean, we had a miscarriage between Uriah and Caleb. And the way, I mean, it hit us differently than it hits anybody. Like
Yeah.
everybody has their own process,
Yep.
and even the way that we processed it and we went through it, it's like we can't necessarily encourage somebody the same way that you and Sarah can,
Yeah.
and on that, it's the ultimate, just like it's even just weird to talk about, to be honest,
Yeah.
because I'm like, how could you call something so devastating and not cool ultimately a gift, right? But you're like, man, it brings you guys closer. It gives you an opportunity to encourage, and that is how God's economy works.
Yeah.
And like, there's no other economy or culture where that is a reality,
Hmm.
you know?
Yeah. And I think it's part of the mystery. It is a mystery in a sense, and it's also like there's a few questions that I have that I don't think I'm going to get answers until I see Jesus face to face,
Yeah.
right? And those are going to be some of them. Like,
Yeah.
why did I have to walk through this? Why did we have to walk through this? Why, 6 different times we had to walk through loss when we knew we were getting prophetic words, we were getting all these different things, and it just like wasn't coming to pass, right?
Yeah.
And so I think you're right. I think it's like this. It's it's that it's a delicate dance of walking, trusting the Lord. Then also, those are real things,
Yeah.
real feelings, real emotions. And those aren't things that I think we should try to hide away from. I think we need to address them. They need to be brought out. And that's why, like, community was throughout this entire journey for
Mhm.
us.
Yeah.
And if we didn't have community, I, 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 I think we did great in pursuing the Lord and pursuing each other. But we also had a crew behind us, our family, the community that we chose to pursue and to get connected with. If we didn't have them, I don't know.
Yeah. Question on that. So if people are in a spot right now where maybe they have experienced a lot and they've kind of gone through it as lone wolves,
Yeah,
or as I like to call, lost puppies,
lost
um,
puppies.
how would you encourage them to find that community? How would you encourage them with finding it, developing it, cultivating
Mm-hmm.
it. Because I always say you don't find community, you create it.
Yep.
Because it's like it's not like you just go to the store. Oh, there's community. Oh, it's 10.99. Awesome. I'm gonna toss that in my pocket.
Yeah. Yep.
It's like you have to go and create it. How did you guys do that in your marriage?
Yeah. How do we create it? That's a great question. Um, I think there was a ton of creating of pursuing, right? I think one, it comes to like, what are we looking for, right?
Yep.
What am I seeing that I desire, that I'm craving?
Mm-hmm.
Um, then I create moments. There was moments where I pursued other men that were a little bit further down the road than me.
Yep.
Sarah would do the same, other women. I mean, there's times where you take them to coffee, right? You go to, hey, can I come over for dinner? Like, and all my mess, can you please? And the Lord brought people who said yes, right? And
Yep.
so I think in creating those moments, I think there's got to be a communication of like, what are we wanting, right? What am I seeing? What am I, seeing, right? And some of it is you're going to find out if it's real or not,
Yep.
right? In the sense of like social media. Social media portrays something that not always is real,
Yep.
right? But for us, like we chose to create moments of pursuing, and it's going to cost you. It cost us something, right? It was
Yep.
extra nights. It was extra, maybe extra money that we needed to invest into it, right? Or whatever it
Yep.
might be. But it was really just us getting out of our comfort zone and pursuing, because I think there's going to be a lot of opportunities that people are laying out the opportunity for you to connect or build community,
Mm-hmm.
but there has to be a pursuit on your end as well. And so
Yeah.
I think for us, we saw the opportunities, or we created the opportunities by asking,
Mm-hmm.
and we followed suit because we knew that we couldn't do life alone, nor is it how God created us to do life alone.
Yeah. Yeah. I love that. Pursue and create.
Yeah.
Like just bottom line right there. Pursue and create. I mean,
Hmm.
that's how we ended up living together. I mean,
Yeah.
I knew I was gonna get married. I knew I was gonna like be asking Steph to marry me. And I had lived with John already.
Yep.
And I was like, at the time I was living with three other dudes.
Yeah.
And I'm like, these guys are not going to make me any better of a potential husband. If anything, they're just going to get me into more trouble in the
Yeah.
process.
Yeah.
And I remember going to your dad and being like, hey, Tim, uh, can I live with you? And his first response, dude, I'll never forget it. He was like, absolutely, Bubba. and, and you know, and it was so cool when you talk about, like social media and all this. Like that was one of the greatest gifts, and why, like, I'd take a bullet for anybody in your family, maybe except Justin, because he has enough muscle to stop
You
it
to bounce it
himself.
off. Yeah, totally.
But like, living with you guys, like it was one of those things where I was like, man, what you see is real. Like,
Yeah.
And to this day, like I was texting your dad maybe a few weeks ago. To this day, I could text your dad and he could be across the world. And the first chance he has to get back, he gets back,
Yeah.
And I think that kind of community where people have your back in a way, either because you've pursued it or, you have accepted an invite of some sort.
Yep.
I don't think it can be understated enough how important that is just
Yeah.
for everything.
And I would say too, Cody, I think for you called out, right? You said pursue and create. I think that there is a piece for us to like, we have such deep connections with our community now and the community that we had in San Diego,
Mm-hmm.
because I think that there was a piece of us that came to the point of like, I can't hold this in. I have to let people know like where I'm
Yeah.
at and how I'm processing and what I'm going through, and like invite people into the frustration, the
Mm-hmm.
chaos, right? The grief, the pain, the loss, right? Like you name it, we had to let people in. And so
Mm-hmm.
I'd say in that same position of like wanting that community, like once you find it, begin to go deep. Like it's gonna take time,
Yeah.
but you can begin to open up quicker than you think you can,
Yeah.
right? And I think that was probably one of the greatest gifts that we did, was we opened up to where, man, like you said, like I'll take a bullet. Like there's so many people that I would say that for, because of
Yeah.
what we've walked through together.
Yeah.
And so when you pursue and you begin to create, man, like allow that transparency, allow that vulnerability to come out. And guys who are listening, right? Like it's so hard. It's so difficult for us sometimes, but there's a reward on the other side.
Now, okay, speaking of reward, like, how have you seen that? How have you seen the fruit and the reward come from, like, not just what you've walked through, but like, so I'm thinking about everything, right? The past 10 years. And ultimately, it's almost like it culminated like in the vow renewal, like that, you know, you get to kind of like draw a fresh line of like, look what the Lord has done and move forward. But like, what kind of rewards have you seen come from like pursuing the Lord, staying in unity, pursuing community? What rewards have you seen from that?
Well, I think one, man, we have 3 amazing kiddos when we were in a season thinking that we would never have kiddos.
Yeah.
Right. And we tell people how close our kids are and everything. And people are like, y'all are crazy. Right. And it's just like, I constantly go back to, and I'm like, this was something that we prayed for so long, and people were praying with us that now it's the Lord kind of like laughing at us. Like, that's what I say is like, this is the Lord's humor of like, hey, you asked for this. Here you go. Bam, bam, bam.
Yeah.
And so I would say, I think a piece of the reward that we're experiencing now and we're choosing to live in is like, I think there's a piece of the reward looks a little bit different than what we were expecting.
Yeah.
And that's okay, because I think that we are in a position now, in a place to where that reward it is such a gift, right?
Yeah.
Like, I'm thinking about wells. There are still things to this day that we constantly come up against of like, gosh, this sucks, like whatever it might be. But then, man, you get to just see him like it's one of my favorite things is he's like laying on the ground or sitting in his chair, and I'm like off doing the dishes or whatever. And I just look over and he's just like looking and smiling at me, man. Like, and it just wipes away all the loss and grief and things that I feel like, right, that are still probably there, and I'm still processing them.
Yeah.
But at the same time, like, right, there can be joy in the midst of grief, right? Like, there's joy
100%.
always that comes in the morning, but there also can be joy right in the moment, right? Like, it's a choice. A lot of it is a choice. And so I'd say the reward, man, is like, it's something that we've had to let go to receive actually the reward that the Lord really has for us and what he has given us. And so I think, to your point even too, man, like that 10-year vow renewal, man, I look back, man, and I'm just like, man, what a gift, because I told everyone, I said, we're doing this because, one, I love my wife and I want everyone here to know it, right? But secondly, this is us telling the enemy that this family of ours, and the beauty of it, man, too, is like, we got to bring our 3 kids along the journey with us because they're a part of this journey now.
Yeah.
And that was such a joy of like, you guys are in this too. And part of these next 10 years, my choices, the decisions I make, it's going to affect these 3, right?
Yeah.
And so it just was a gift. And so I'd say the reward, I don't even know if I'm answering your question, but the reward was just like, is a living kind of receiving of really what the Lord has for us, and not just what I thought I wanted or what I needed.
Yeah. So sometimes the rewards that the Lord's give us, they come in packages we don't want to unwrap.
Yeah, totally.
It comes in, all we see is this, like a bag full of crap on fire, and we're like, we're not touching that.
Yeah.
But we don't know, like, actually the Lord hid it inside something that looks incredibly undesirable.
Yeah.
And if you stay in the game long enough and you pursue and you dig, you're like, oh man, like, look what I could have missed out on.
Yeah.
And also what I hear you saying is so much about like the choice. I mean, that word keeps coming up. Like, all of this is a choice. Pursuing your wife, pursuing the Lord, finding the joy in the midst of the pain. All of it's such a choice, and nobody can make that choice for you other than you. Like, no one can make it for you.
Yeah.
So one last question. And this is kind of just an encouragement to anyone who's listening. If you had somebody, just, another guy sitting down in front of you right now, and he's going through he's going either through similar things you've gone through, or, some other kind of really difficult thing. What would you like? How would you encourage him? Like, what would you tell him if you just had a couple minutes right in front of him? Say, hey, this is, I want to encourage you in this way. to keep going? What would you tell them?
I think first off, man, I would celebrate the willingness to come forward and to live in the light,
Hmm.
because I think that um, men, we struggle not only being vulnerable, but what we struggle with humility. We
Yeah.
struggle with pride, right? Like
Yep.
it's just it's easier for us to fall in a position of being prideful than to choose and walk in humility.
Yeah.
And so I think I would celebrate the heck out of coming and living in the light and beginning to share, right, what's going on, what's actually going on in that aspect.
Hmm.
Because I think that there's victory, right?
Yeah.
There's a posture when we choose to walk in vulnerability, like freedom comes, right?
Yeah.
It might not be full breakthrough from your situation or whatever it might be walking through, but you begin to taste and begin to see what freedom actually feels and looks like.
Hmm.
I'd say the other thing too is I'm a I have been in a season of really trying to live out, like, the whole, and again, church world, church term is like that accountability partner,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
Like, I love it, I hate it, right? Because I have some dear friends of mine who are walking through a season of living in the light and not staying hidden with, addiction to pornography and
Yeah.
lies and all these different things. But man, I would say to encourage them too is like, man, find people who can be in your corner,
Hmm.
right? That can call you out, call you up, right? And they're actually going to do it,
Yep.
because I think too many people just don't do it. They don't follow through on it.
Yeah.
And I was that person for a long time, man. But I'm really trying to be intentional. So, man, I would encourage this guy who's struggling, man. Come to the light, live in the light. Know that that it's a safe place, and if it's not, find the right people to be able to do it with.
Yeah. Yeah. It's funny is about a year ago, I went to, I got asked to come help another business, like man their booth at it was a TBI foundation for like traumatic brain injuries. And there was a bunch of MMA fighters there. Matt Hughes was one of them. If anyone has followed MMA for a long time, they'll know who Matt Hughes is. But and now because of actually got in a traumatic car crash with a train, and it really messed him up. And so his speech is really slurred now, all this stuff. But he was talking about because every fighter in the MMA has a corner, right? And he talked about the significance of his corner and how he and his corner
Come
were
on.
so unified. And
Yeah.
here, dude, bro, this is what he said, bro. And I'm sitting in the middle of like, it's a bunch of rich people because it's just like a ton of people that are there totally drunk, getting ready to give a ton of money, right? And he says this thing, and like the preacher sermon maker in me, it like latches onto this. He goes, me and my corner are so in lockstep and unified that when I step into the octagon, my opponent knows one thing. They're not just fighting me. They're fighting my entire corner.
Come on.
And I was like, woo! Like, bro, it fired me up.
Oh yeah.
And I feel like that's whether it's accountability partners, where I call them battle buddies,
Yeah.
like, or just community in general. It's like there's two ways to enter the octagon of life as a man. It's me versus you, or it's you versus me and my entire corner.
That's right.
And
So
like you
good.
said, we get to make the choice on whether or not we live that way.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah.
well, Matt, I like seriously, man. I can't thank you enough for having the conversation. I know that, whenever I always want to be sensitive with conversations like this, because it's like on one end, we want to be an encouragement to other people and live life vulnerably and transparently, but also I don't want to make people relive things. And so your transparency and vulnerability, I value highly.
Yeah.
But also, man, I just want to honor you. I want to honor you and Sarah because, whether it was when we lived around each other, whether it's when we lived with each other, when we were younger, or even now as we see things from a distance, Steph and I see you guys, your pursuit of the Lord, your pursuit of each other, and your pursuit of like facing whatever you're faced with hope and joy in the midst of whatever the pain is there.
Yeah.
I think that is to be celebrated. I just want to honor that and honor you guys for that, because not everybody chooses that.
Yeah.
And it's clear how you guys have chosen that and lived that. So thank you for being that example and being that light, because I think the world needs more dudes like you that, don't go through hard things like that and just throw their hands up in the air and say, screw you, God, we're done.
Yeah.
But are like, no, we're going to hold on to hope and we're going to keep chasing them down.
Come on.
So appreciate you, man.
Hey man, well, I want to encourage you right back at you, man. Like I've just enjoy you as a friend, as someone that is always challenges me, man. I can't remember times you challenge me to do some type of workout challenge or scripture challenge, right, or whatever it might be. But you challenge people. You always bring people up without kind of shaming them, and it's such a gift. And I would say anyone who's listening to this podcast as well, like there's a ton of gold and meat within this podcast that Cody has put together. And I would say and encourage you is you listen throughout the podcast and you think of someone, send it, share it, right? Like there was one I was listening to that you had with the guy from your church who's a counselor.
Yeah, Jeffrey. Yeah.
Jeffrey, right? Like I was able to send to a buddy of mine who got encouraged by it as well, right?
That's so cool.
There's just so much here that I would say is there's a ton of podcasts out there, right? But this is a good one and it has good people. And it's led by someone who's really genuine. And so share it.
Awesome, man. Well, again, I appreciate you. Hope to make it out to Spokane again soon. We'll just meet up in Coeur d'Alene. We'll meet up in Coeur d'Alene.
I'll meet you there anytime.
And we'll rock and roll there.
I'm here for it.
Awesome, brother. Well, we'll call the recording here. I appreciate you being with me, buddy. I love you. We'll talk soon.
Love you.